If you've ever watched someone destroy their own life, chasing something they were never meant to have, keep watching. Because what happened to Amara in Lagos will shake you to your core. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button now, because the stories we tell on this channel, they don't let you go. The night Amara stole her sister's man, it was raining in Lagos. Not the soft, apologetic kind of rain that barely wets the ground. This was the kind of rain that comes with thunder so loud, it feels like God is angry at something specific, like he already knew what was about to happen. Amara stood at her bedroom window, watching the water pour down the glass, her phone in her hand. On the screen was a photo, her younger sister, Ngozi, laughing, her head thrown back the way only truly happy people laugh. And beside her was Emeka, who had just sent Amara a private message that said, "I think about you more than I should." She read it 3 times, then she screenshotted it, then she deleted the screenshot because she was afraid of what it meant that she'd saved it. Let's be clear about something right from the start. Amara was not a bad person. That's the part of the story that makes it so hard to look away. She was a 28-year-old accountant working at a mid-tier firm on Lagos Island. She paid her own rent in Lekki. She sent money home to her mother every month without being asked. She went to church, not the kind of church where you just show up to be seen, but the kind where she actually sat in the front row and sang with her whole chest. But Amara had a wound she'd never let anyone stitch up, and Ngozi, sweet, effortless, glowing Ngozi, had been accidentally pressing on that wound her entire life without knowing it. Ngozi was 24, 4 years younger, and somehow 4 times more everything. More beautiful in that quiet, effortless way that doesn't need makeup to announce itself. More social, more spontaneous. Her mother lit up differently when Ngozi walked into a room, and Amara had spent 28 years telling herself she didn't notice. She noticed. She noticed every single time. And now, Ngozi had Emeka. Emeka was 32, who worked in tech, who drove a clean gray Corolla and read actual books, and remembered things people told him weeks later. Emeka, who had come to meet the family 6 months ago, and had in one dinner made Amara's mother laugh harder than anyone had in years. Emeka, who had looked across the table at Amara that first night with something in his eyes that wasn't quite politeness, something sharper, something that lingered. Amara pushed it down, poured herself more water, talked too loudly about work, but then the messages started. Small ones at first. Your sister is lucky to have you looking out for her. You seem like the steady one. Then longer ones, late night ones, the kind that came after 11 p.m. when the city quieted down and guards came down with it. She should have told Ngozi. She knows that now, or she would know it later when knowing it would cost her everything. Instead, she replied. It started as something she told herself was innocent. She and Emeka had things in common that he and Ngozi didn't. Ngozi was bubbly and present tense, always talking about what was happening right now, tonight, this weekend. Amara and Emeka could talk for an hour about the economy, about childhood, about the specific loneliness of being the responsible one in a family. She told herself, this is just connection. This is just 2 people who happen to get each other. This means nothing. But it meant something. She felt it in the way she checked her phone first thing in the morning, in the way she started wearing her nicer work blouses on days she might run into him at family events, in the way she started resenting Ngozi's happiness in a way that frightened her. One evening in March, Ngozi called Amara, crying. Not dramatic crying, the quiet, confused kind. She said, "Emeka has been distant. I don't know what I did. He says nothing is wrong, but I can feel it." Amara sat on her couch, phone pressed to her ear, and she said, "Maybe he's just stressed with work, Ngozi. You know how men get." And she believed in that moment that she was being a good sister. She was helping Ngozi stay calm. She was not telling Ngozi what she knew, which was that Emeka wasn't distant because of work stress. He was distant because he had just told Amara 2 nights before that he hadn't felt this understood by anyone in years. That night, alone in her apartment, Amara stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and typed, "We need to stop talking like this." Emeka replied within 60 seconds, "I know, but I don't want to." She put the phone face down. She didn't reply, but she didn't block him either. That was the crack in the door, and what came through it, she was not prepared for. April came, and with it, Emeka's company anniversary party, one of those Lagos tech events in a rooftop bar on Victoria Island, fairy lights and expensive small chops, and people laughing just a little too loud because the drinks were free. Ngozi invited Amara. Amara almost said no, but some part of her, the part she hadn't been honest with yet, said yes. She wore a red dress she'd bought 6 months ago and never worn. Ngozi complimented her when she arrived. Emeka, standing beside Ngozi when Amara walked in, went very still for a moment. Just a second, the kind of stillness most people wouldn't catch. Amara caught it. The night went the way those nights go. Music too loud to hold a serious conversation, drinks passed around on trays. Ngozi drifted toward her friends, the way Ngozi always drifted, beautifully, effortlessly, like a butterfly who doesn't notice it's leaving something behind. Emeka found Amara at the edge of the rooftop, looking out on the Lagos skyline. "You came," he said. "My sister invited me," she said. "I know." They stood there for a moment. The city hummed below them. Somewhere, a generator kicked on, just like they always do in Lagos. Just when things get quiet, something loud reasserts itself. "You're avoiding me," he said. "I'm standing next to you right now. You know what I mean." She turned to look at him. This was the mistake. Not the dress, not coming to the party. The mistake was turning and actually looking at him with all his defenses down, in the Lagos night with its warm, orange-smelling air and the sound of Afro beats from the floor below. "Amara," she said, "you're with my sister." "I know," he said, and his voice, when he said it, sounded like a man who genuinely, deeply did not know what to do about that. She walked away. That
Look
was
at
the
you
day
in that dress.
everything
You look
broke.
absolutely stunning
She told
tonight.
herself
Oh,
afterwards
thank
that she
you.
had
You
not
look
planned
amazing
it,
too.
that it had just happened, that there is such a thing as a moment that swallows you whole before you can think. And all of that was true, and none of it mattered. Because Ngozi called at noon, while Emeka was still there, and Amara looked at her sister's name on the screen and let it ring out. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Amara's life. Emeka and Ngozi were still technically together. Emeka had said he needed time, not that it was over. Ngozi was confused and hurting, but holding on, the way young women in love hold on, with both hands and all of their faith. And Amara was living a double life so thin it was almost transparent. She couldn't eat properly. She went to church and sat in the front row and couldn't hear a single word of the sermon. She called her mother and kept the conversations light and short because she was terrified her mother would hear something in her voice. And Emeka, this is the part she kept turning over and over in her head like a stone she couldn't put down. Emeka was different from the first night, subtly but unmistakably. He was still warm, still the man who remembered things you said weeks later, who talked about books and the economy and childhood. But there was something underneath all of it that she couldn't name, something that didn't quite add up. He never asked her what she wanted, not once. He talked about his feelings, his conflict, his situation. When she tried to say, "I don't know if I want to be someone's secret," he would pivot gently into something else, and she would follow, because the conversations were good, and she was deep in the middle of something she started and didn't know how to finish. Then Ngozi called, not to cry this time, not confused, calm. "Amara, I need to ask you something." The air left Amara's lungs. "What?" "Did Emeka ever say anything to you? About me? About us? Because he's been strange, and he won't tell me why, and I just..." Ngozi's voice broke, just slightly, right there at the seam. "You're my sister. I trust you more than anyone. If you know something, please tell me." Silence. Not a long silence. Maybe 2 seconds. Maybe 3. "No," Amara said. "I don't know anything." And Ngozi believed her. Of course she did, because Ngozi had never, in 24 years, had a reason not to. It was a Tuesday evening in May when everything cracked open, and it didn't crack open the way Amara feared it would, messily, publicly, with a confrontation and tears and shouting. It cracked open quietly, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. Amara came home from work to find Emeka outside her apartment building, not inside, outside, on the street, leaning against a wall, and there was something about the way he was standing, too still, like he'd been there a long time, like he was waiting for something he already knew the answer to, that made her stop walking. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I need to tell you something." And his voice was different. It had shed something. All the warmth was still there, but under it was something she hadn't heard before, something flat and precise, like a man speaking without a mask for the first time. "Can we go upstairs?" she asked. "Here is fine." She stood on the pavement. The evening traffic of Lekki hummed around them, Okadas weaving, a woman selling plantain 3 feet away. "I'm leaving Lagos," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I've accepted a job in Abuja. I've been deciding for a while. I'm leaving in 3 weeks." "And Ngozi?" "I ended it this afternoon. Properly. I was honest with her. Not about you," he added quickly. "I told her that I wasn't in the right place to give her what she deserved, which is true." Amara stared at him. "So what are you saying to me right now? What is this?" He was quiet for a moment. The plantain seller glanced over and away again. A bus honked in the distance. "I'm saying," he said carefully, "that I'm sorry. For all of it. I came to you in the middle of something I should have ended first. I made you," he paused, "I made you complicit in something I should have had the courage to handle on my own, and I'm sorry for that." She opened her mouth, closed it. "I didn't plan any of this, Amara," he said. "I want you to know that." "But you're leaving anyway," she said. "Yes." She looked at him for a long time. This man she had broken something precious for, this man she had looked at across a dinner table and felt seen by and let herself follow into the worst decision of her adult life. And something occurred to her, standing there on the pavement with the city moving all around them, something cold and clarifying. She had never known him. Not really. She had known the version of him that came to her late at night when his guard was down. She had known the good conversations and the warmth and the way he made her feel interesting and understood. But she had never asked the hard questions. Where are we going? What do you want? Is this real? She had been so hungry for the feeling that she had never examined the source. "Go," she said. He looked at her. "Amara." "Go, Emeka. Go to Abuja. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for up there." He nodded once, and then he left. He walked to his gray Corolla, got in, and drove away. The plantain seller called out to Amara if she wanted to buy some plantain, and Amara, absurdly, bought 3 fingers of plantain she didn't want and stood on the street eating them slowly while the sun went down over Lagos. Here is the thing they don't tell you about jealousy. They say it's about wanting what someone else has, and that's part of it. But the deeper part, the root that goes all the way down, is about not believing you deserve your own good things. Amara had spent years watching Ngozi receive love easily, openly, the way a plant receives rain, naturally, as if it belonged to her. And Amara had decided somewhere along the way, without meaning to, that she was not the kind of woman things came easily to, that she had to reach, had to take. But you can't take your way into being loved. You can only reach for something that isn't yours and find at the end of your arm something hollow. She sat with that for a long time. 3 weeks after Emeka left, Ngozi showed up at Amara's apartment unannounced. She had a bag from that suya spot they'd been going to since secondary school. She looked tired, but not broken. Heartbroken people look a specific way, like their face is doing its best, but there's a lag between the expression and the feeling behind it. Ngozi looked like that.
"I brought suya," she said. "Okay," Amara said, and stepped back to let her in. They ate at Amara's small kitchen table, the way they had 100 times growing up. For a while, they talked about nothing: their mother, work, a cousin's upcoming wedding, normal things, the kind of conversation that holds two people together while something larger moves beneath the surface. Then Ngozi said, "You know what the worst part is? I keep trying to figure out what I did wrong. I keep going back through everything, trying to find the moment I should have done something differently." Amara put down her suya. She could not look at her sister. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "You don't know that." "I do." Ngozi was quiet. Then, "He was good to me, you know? He was genuinely good to me. And then one day he just turned off, like a switch, and I never understood why." The apartment was very quiet. Outside, a neighbor's television murmured through the wall. "Ngozi," Amara said. Her voice came out strange, smaller than she intended. "I need to tell you something." And then she stopped. She sat there with the truth right there in her throat, right at the surface, and she felt the full weight of what telling it would cost. She would lose Ngozi. Maybe not forever, but for a long time, long enough to feel like forever. She would lose her mother's particular brand of love, which was warm but had conditions Amara had never dared test. She would lose the version of herself she'd managed to maintain in everyone's eyes, steady, responsible, the one who held things together. Ngozi was watching her. "What?" she said softly. Amara looked at her sister, at the face she'd grown up beside, at the person who had called her when she was hurting and asked, "Did you know anything?" and believed her when she said no. "I'm sorry," Amara said, for not always being as good a sister you deserved." Ngozi frowned, confused but gentle. "What are you talking about? You're a great sister." "I'm not always," Amara said. "I'm not always." She did not tell Ngozi the full truth that night. Maybe that was cowardice. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe, and this is the version Amara told herself for years afterwards, it was because the damage was already done, and what Ngozi needed was not more pain, but time. The man was gone. The relationship was over. What would the truth do except transfer Amara's guilt into Ngozi's chest? She has never fully decided if that reasoning was wisdom or weakness. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe some
It took a long time, longer than she expected, because guilt doesn't clean up neatly. It leaves a residue. But the night that told her something had shifted, really shifted, was 8 months later. She and Ngozi were at their mother's house for a Saturday afternoon, sitting in the back compound where their mother grew her tomatoes, and Ngozi was describing a man she'd met at work who seemed promising, and their mother was leaning forward with interest. And Amara looked at Ngozi's face, animated and hopeful and bright, and felt for the first time in as long as she could remember genuine happiness for her sister. Clean happiness, no sediment of envy underneath it, just warmth. She nearly cried, not from sadness, from relief. Now here is the part the storytellers in the old markets of Ibadan would have understood, the part the grandmothers would have leaned in for, because there was something about Emeka that Amara never told anyone, something she turned over in her mind months after he left in that gray Corolla. There was the night, 3 weeks before he left, when she woke up at 2 a.m. to find him awake beside her, sitting up, looking at the wall. Not with a vague, unfocused look like a man who just woke up, with a concentrated, listening look, like there was something in the room that only he could hear. "Emeka?" she said. He startled slightly, turned to her, and for just a second, she swore afterward, to herself only because she never said this out loud to anyone, for just a second, his eyes were wrong. Not wrong like sick wrong, wrong like distance wrong, like the part she thought she knew had briefly vacated and something else was sitting behind those eyes. Calm, ancient, watching. Then he blinked and smiled his normal smile, and he said he was just thinking. And she told herself she had imagined it. Lagos nights do things to you. The heat and the noise and the guilt and the insomnia will make you see things that aren't there. But there was also the morning she walked past the guest bathroom and found the sink running cold water and a smell in the air, not unpleasant, just deeply unfamiliar, like fresh soil and something older than soil. And when she asked him, he said he'd just washed his face. And there was the way her neighbor's dog, a fat old compound dog who had never bothered anyone, pressed itself against the wall and whimpered every time Emeka came up the stairs. And there was the thing her mother said, later, about Ngozi's recovery, how Ngozi had bounced back from the heartbreak faster than anyone expected, how she seemed lighter. And in fact, Ngozi's life had opened up in the months after Emeka left. A promotion, a new apartment, an introduction to someone genuine and present and good, as if something that had been sitting on her path had simply lifted and moved aside. Amara's aunt from the village, who said things that made people uncomfortable, and was usually right, came to visit in November. She sat in the mother's parlor and asked for everyone, and when Emeka's name came up, she went quiet in a specific way. Then she said, to no one in particular, "It is not every man who suffers when a thing leaves him. Sometimes the suffering is in what the thing chose not to take." Everyone in the room looked at her. She said no more. She asked for more rice. Amara has thought about those words every year since then, on rainy nights especially, when Lagos thunders the way it did the night she stood at the window reading that first message that said, "I think about you more than I should." She thinks about the dog pressed against the wall, about the eyes that went briefly flat and distant at 2 a.m., about the strange smell of soil and something older than soil. She thinks about the fact that she went after something she wanted out of jealousy. She broke something, her integrity, her sister's trust, her own sense of who she was, out of hunger and insecurity and the long, unhealed wound of feeling like second place. She did all of that, and the thing she reached for had simply left, with no real consequence for itself, as if it had never particularly needed what she was offering, as if it had only paused in her life the way water pauses before it finds the next channel. She does not know what Emeka was. She knows who she is. She knows who she chose to become after. That, maybe, is the older story, the one the grandmothers would have told around fires before Lagos had electricity and rooftop bars and late-night messages on glowing screens. The story is not about the creature or the man or the thing with the wrong eyes at 2 a.m. The story is about what you reach for when you are hollow and what reaching like that costs you, and whether you have the courage afterward to fill yourself from the inside. Amara did. Slowly, the way rivers fill in dry season, not all at once, but steadily, drop by drop, until one day you look and there is water again. She is 32 now. She is still an accountant. She still sits in the front row at church and sings with her whole chest. She sent Ngozi flowers last month for no reason. Her mother calls them both every Sunday and doesn't light up differently for either one. Or maybe she does, and it just doesn't sting anymore. There is a man in Amara's life now. She has not rushed it. She has asked the hard questions early. She has been honest, sometimes uncomfortably so, about who she is and what she has done and what she is still working on. He is not perfect. She is not perfect. They're doing the slow, difficult, honest thing, and it feels nothing like the electric, guilty, consuming thing with Emeka. It feels better, quieter, like ground that actually holds you. She still thinks about the dog, sometimes, the way it pressed against the wall. She has decided she is grateful she was not taken, that whatever it was that passed through her sister's life and then through hers, she is grateful it left when it did. She is grateful in the way you are grateful for a fever that breaks, for a storm that passes, for a night that finally becomes morning. There is an old saying, not Yoruba specifically, but the kind of wisdom that belongs to all of us, that says, "The hunger that makes you steal will never be satisfied by what you take." Amara knows that now, in her bones, the way you know things that have cost you something real to learn. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself somewhere in the story, in the hunger, in the reaching, in the hollow space that made you do something you are not proud of, know this: the story is not over when you fall. It continues. It has to continue. The only disgrace is stopping. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join this family, because these are the stories that don't let you go easily, the ones that stay with you on rainy nights, the ones you think about on quiet mornings, the kind of story your grandmother might have told you if she trusted you enough with the difficult version of the truth. Subscribe and come back, because there are more stories where this one came from, and every single one of them will find something real inside you.